Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is our next session. It's called Preventing Consent and Data Sharing Risks in the US and Europe. So, very much in line with what we just talked about. Instead of just focusing on mobile apps, we're talking about mobile apps and websites here. Just to introduce ourselves, I'm Ben Werner. I lead product marketing at Privado.ai. This is my colleague, Patrick.
Patrick Murthey. I lead the customer success team here in North America. Partner with you guys if you move forward with Privado at any point.
Thank you. So today we're going to walk through how Privado, how the platform works in preventing these risks, identifying the risks, and reducing your overall risk profile. So please do submit questions throughout the demo/presentation. We'll try to answer those at the end. Okay. So just the lay of the land, we talked about how we're going to, there's a mobile app and there's website privacy risks. There's different types, right? You can collect too much data, over-process it, sensitive data you shouldn't be collecting. Today, we're just going to focus on third-party sharing risks related to insufficient consent and sensitive data sharing that shouldn't happen regardless of consent. Just to highlight this issue, so V just highlighted this in our last session, if you missed it. So we've analyzed the consent compliance, you may call it, landscape for websites. We've released a report showing that about 75% of the top websites are not compliant with local regulations, and there's 3 times as many consent risks in the US versus Europe. As you can see, we're building the data set for mobile apps right now, and a lot of the same risks exist. So to curb that, and we've got 2 ways of getting the full picture of consent and data sharing risks in mobile apps and websites. And this is really the best way to get the full picture. So the first thing that we do is we scan the code of a website or an app. This gives us a full picture of all the data elements that are collected, all the data flows, all the third parties that there exist in the code base that you can see that it's in the logic of the code itself. This helps detect sensitive data sharing that shouldn't happen regardless of consent. And also you can flag risks early in the development lifecycle. And then the other piece is dynamic scanning. So that's scanning a live website or app, once it's already in production. And from there, you can really test data flows based on user consent actions. You can see what happens based on when the user selects accept, reject, or doesn't do anything at all. You can see whether the banner is loading as it should. And you can see which third parties are not honoring consent. All right, so now I'm going to dive into I'm going to pass this off to Patrick. He's going to dive into code scanning.
Thank you, Ben. And then I'm going to share my screen here. So we're looking now at the Privado UI. And so as Ben was saying, and V prior to him in the previous session, through scanning your code, your source of truth via your SCM, your source code management, or your CI/CD pipelines where your devs are pushing new code, we're able to detect immediately what risk you have within your ecosystem by first surfacing what data elements you have, along with those data flows to third parties, any APIs, databases, or collections that are happening. So within here, what you can see is we've scanned a mobile application. This is just an open source leaky health app, if you will. And in here, you can see that we've surfaced a plethora of data elements, categorization, sensitivity, and then the data flows per each data element. This gives your analysts and your legal team a quick understanding of what potential risk is occurring within an application without having to do a manual interview with your dev team, taking time away from them pushing new functionality for your software. And so really with Privado, being able to hook up to the source of truth, your source code, or your pipelines, we're able to then detect exactly what data elements you have in play and where they're going to. So within here, you could see a plethora of personal identifiable information. In here, like Ben was saying, there's still some information that we shouldn't be sharing regardless of consent, really owning in on the trust with our constituents, with our clients, with our consumers. And so here you can see I'm hovering over illness and medical condition. You can see that's health data, pretty highly sensitive. and it's getting sent to a plethora of third-party vendors and providers. So as a privacy analyst, of course, in the live demo, we get a little error here. Let me get a refresh going. But within here, we'd be able to then see exactly what information, medical and illness conditions are being shared outward, what's being processed internally within the application. And so for a privacy analyst or legal team, now without having to interview my dev or NG team, I can see that there's some risk here. And so we're sending some sensitive information to some advertisers, and now we can go ahead and take action if we need to. And that's really where the power of Privado comes into play, is we're not just surfacing these risks or potential risks to your teams, we're also giving you the code in which that risk was surfaced. So teams are able to understand ingress through source and egress through sync and all the transformations that are happening in here, in which we're sending personal information over to a third party so that the teams can have a more informed conversation if they do indeed need to remediate on medical illness flowing to something like Google AdMob or Meta Facebook. And with that too, this is a good view as to those data elements that you're sending and where those flows are going. We can also look at it at a third-party perspective. So if there were additional APIs or storage, we'd pick up on that as well. But here we can see from a third-party perspective, hey, what are we just sending over to Facebook? And of this, you can see just immediately, some of this might be benign, email address, device identifier might be all good and dandy for your organization based on your contracts with Facebook and your privacy policy. But this is where a privacy analyst can come in and see, oh, we're sharing gender, illness information. Maybe we should take a glance and see why we're doing that first and foremost. And then if we need to remediate, again, we can go into the code analysis for those specific callouts and be able to work with our dev engineering team to be able to remove that risk or understand that risk, update our privacy policies, our sub-processor lists, etc. So it really gives the privacy analyst teams, privacy engineering teams, the insight they need to understand risk and be able to take some action to mitigate that risk if they so choose. And with that, I'll pass it over to Ben, and he'll showcase a little bit more on the mobile app side.
Yes, 1 second. Okay. Is my screen up there?
We got you, Ben.
Yes, it is. Okay. So continuing on the mobile app thread, now we're going to look at the mobile app data from the dynamic scan. So that was a code scan for the open source Leaky Health app. So here we've done a dynamic scan for a solitaire app that's out there. And I'm going to start off with the permissions. So we just talked about permissions in the session with V. So here you can see all the permissions that this app has enabled. The key thing is, a lot of these are benign, but there's some sensitive ones in here that can enable some risks. Right here, so here we have read media images as an example. Now we'll go over to the third parties section. So talking about data sharing risks, it's really important that you have that full inventory of third parties, what SDKs, what APIs are integrated with the app, which ones are advertising. Here you can see we have Lyft Mobile. And then we can also see that certain data flows going to these third parties. So clicking into Google, we can see that language, device info, and unique identifier are being sent to Google. And we've also pinpointed the evidence to prove that, to do any remediation, to show any engineers or product teams what we're talking about when we see these data sharing risks. And they can go in here and look at the evidence. Moving on. I'll go over to the consent checks. So in California, the CPRA law, prohibits any personal data sharing to advertising third parties when the reject action is taken. So here we can see there's 10 third parties that are receiving personal data despite the reject action being taken. Now we can also scan mobile apps, websites, code that for apps in the US, Europe, really in any location. So we have a lot of preset checks for several locations, including Canada, China, and in any location in Europe. So looking at these, you can see there's issues generated for remediation. I can dive into one for Google Ads, and this has all the detail showing, what policy this is breaking, what the guidance is. It has the evidence, and then we can go in and actually send a ticket through Jira to the appropriate team to resolve the issue. So you can select what project it needs to go to, the priority, and so on. So that's the overview for mobile app. I'll pass that back over to Patrick for the website dynamic scan.
Thank you, Ben. I'm just pulling my window back up real quick. All right, so in here, this again is our consent compliance module within Privado. And so what we've done is we've scanned a website that we've just generated for demo purposes called Privacy Patterns. And really what we're doing, just picking up where Ben left off, is being able to scan the website as if we are a user. So again, we all know that websites are very consumer facing, very easy for regulators to look into and pick apart. And so we want to be able to enable our privacy analysts, our web dev teams, our marketing teams to be able to truly understand, hey, we've spent all this time, money, and effort standing up a CMP, consent management platform, the banners that you see on the websites, and also configuring our GPC signals, global privacy control signals, which are binary and set via individuals' browsers like Chrome, Safari, Firefox, etc., so that when a user goes to the website, those signals are picked up and seeing if those are being honored. And same with the banner, making sure that what's being blocked is being blocked. But before we get into all of those compliance-oriented checks to see an audit of our setup, what we do first and foremost is scan everything that would be on that domain. So you can see here, just like we were before, we're able to understand what third parties are in play on the website just off the bat, regardless of consent, regardless of rejecting or accepting that offer. And so it gives privacy analysts and teams the ability to first and foremost understand what do they have running on the website, as that sometimes can be a black hole, especially with legacy companies or turnover. And so really being able to get callouts of, if we scan against a European location, are we doing cross-border transfers? So you could see, we know Google Tag, Google is based in the United States. So if we're an individual from Germany and utilizing the website, we'll see that Google Tag Manager fires. We also have the categorization, so you can filter to exactly what your concern is or what that risk area is you're trying to reduce, and be able to go in and mitigate. And so in here, something that I really like and my teams use pretty regularly to fine tune and get to the risk quickly is in what section of the consent actions along that journey of consent, where are our third parties firing? So we're able to see if it's firing after accept, no action, reject, and be able to quickly identify and navigate to those higher risk third parties that are firing, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and pick on GTM, seeing as most people are familiar with it. We can see that we're picking up and sending browsing information, language, device, and unique identifiers over to GTM. We also have the code details, just like Ben had shown previously, in case you want to do any remediation with those teams. What I see is a lot of teams will end up, privacy teams will end up including their marketing teams or web dev teams in this module specifically, so that they can be able to do checks before they push new updates to websites, check after to make sure everything's functioning, and also just get a source of truth for what's going on. We'll pick up on data elements like I showed you with Google Tag Manager. We're getting into more of the minutia. We're also picking up on the scripts. So this is a way for your teams to easily understand what's getting fired on those sites when your users, when your consumers are on there. So you can see we're filtered out by Google Tag. You even get the domains of what's going on. We get some fingerprinting information here as well, and if there's any browser-based permissions there too. Again, consent actions here, so you can quickly understand, oh, when is this script exactly firing in the consent journey of our users? It's firing at no action. Well, maybe we should take a look into that. That should probably be firing as a Google ad after consent has been accepted. So if it's at opt-out, maybe this would be more benign. It really gives you guys, your teams, the ability to truly understand what's going on. And especially for those teams that use outside contractors or an outside team that might not necessarily have full control over what's getting put on your website. With that, scripts, pretty similar. We'll pull out cookies. So you can see first-party cookies, third-party cookies, persistent. they're secure, and then again, in what part of that consent journey are they firing? So again, some might be higher level risk, some might be more benign based on what you guys have determined as an organization around risk. So really giving that insight and that source of truth of what is on our website and what is running when and how is it happening. And then lastly, in this section, storage. So are we collecting information locally or in session storage? So you guys can be able to understand and go in and remediate where you see fit if you're storing things in locations that maybe you should adjust. We also pull out the consent actions so you know when those things are firing as well. So what I ran through was kind of a general overview. Consent compliance is truly a deep website scan so that my teams can understand exactly what they have on their website, what their risk is, and if they need to, they can take action to remediate. And so kind of moving over to the remediation section in the overview, we set up a plethora of policies. So at Privado, to fine tune our focus on risk, we do various policy setups to check against opt-in, opt-out for the US, and then a variety of other checks that privacy analysts and teams need to be aware of. So dark pattern, kind of moving that over to deceitful pattern, moving away from dark and white, but checking to see, hey, do we have a reject button available on our banner? And then is that reject button our company logo color and everything else is grayed out, making it more attractive to click that button, leading to deceitful habits here? And so we're being able to check against that and see, first and foremost, do you even have the reject button, and do you have color contrast going on? Some other items around button text changing, nomenclature changing within the banner description. This one's probably one of my favorite ones, website and regulatory link presence. So you guys know across the board, based on various regulation jurisdiction, there are various requirements that apply. So we're going to check the website and see if those are available and call out if they aren't for the various regulation regions. You can see here we've scanned against California, Germany, and the UK. This allows, consent compliance allows you to scan, like Ben had said, against a plethora of regional jurisdictions. And we're acting as if we're a user coming from that geofence in that IP region and interacting with the website to do those checks for you. Down here, we'll also check for Google enhancements, so additional piggybacking that Google does, tend to be a little sneaky at times. But going back up top, kind of what's the base level consent check? Well, first and foremost, we check, is there a banner? We can't do any other checks if there's no banner because consent truly isn't being honored in that regard. So I'm going to go pick on Germany over here. We can see that within here, we'll even take a screenshot and you'll be able to see, indeed, there is a banner. And then from there, we can move forward with the checks against opt-in consent compliance for the EU location. So you can see we're only seeing Germany and UK here. California is in the opt-out GPC set. So for Germany, we're going to check, we go to the website, did the banner show first and foremost? The next check is, the banner loaded, is anything firing via cookies or API network calls? And you could see here that there are there's one cookie firing from TikTok. We can click in and we can review that we're firing this cookie from TikTok and it violates the opt-in requirements of the UK GDPR. With that too, you can see API calls in a similar fashion. So a bunch of third parties firing that shouldn't be when the banner's just loaded and we haven't touched anything on the website. You can also see reject all, so things firing after the user has denied consent. And then we do a check for an accept all cookie verification as well to see that things are firing as they intend if someone gives you the green light. And so with that too, you can see we check regional regulations because some more cookies and network calls are happening in the UK than they are in Germany. Even though a lot of our banner CMP settings are blanket across the EU, we see this happen pretty regularly where different countries have different cookies or APIs firing in the process. And so really what consent compliance does is allows your privacy analyst teams to first have a source of truth on what you guys are doing on the websites and where those potential risks are going outbound. And then it allows the teams to do a full audit around consent compliance checks to make sure that based on whatever regional jurisdiction the website is operating and intending for, that you can highlight any risk and then take remediation across the board. And so that's really what we're doing here over on the consent compliance aspect, tying in both the code scanning, which you can scan any software, website, mobile app, etc. And then coming from a front end perspective, acting as if we are a user going to our websites, our domains, and seeing if everything that we've set up is running as we expected. Really honing into consumer trust and giving your privacy and legal teams a leg to stand on and a very firm foundation for whenever they do have to engage with any legalese or regulators that are coming knocking. But with that, that concludes the section of consent compliance. Pass it back to Ben real quick.
Thank you, Patrick. So that concludes the demo for our session today. And I'd just like to summarize what we just went through. So went through 3 aspects of our platform, right? The code scanning aspect that can scan any code that your teams are developing internally. So websites, mobile apps, web apps, internal products. And that gives you the full picture of all the data you're collecting, where it's going, where it's being stored, where it's being shared, how it's being used, full inventory of all your third parties. And this information is in real time. These code scans can be run on a regular basis. They can be run before features even go live. As soon as code is submitted for review, these checks can be run and actually risk can be notified and then addressed even before they even get to the launch process. Then with the dynamic scanning, we went through a mobile app and a website. So these are 2 live products, and we use these tools to simulate user actions, user consent actions, to see what data is flowing based on what the user does. That allows us to determine where the compliance risks are. So with that, I'll move over to the question and answer part of this session. We have a few questions that were submitted. Submit any more if you have any. We had one submitted about the different locations. So we answered that, I think, in the presentation. We can scan, simulate user actions in any location. And we have preset checks done for the US and Europe.
Yeah, I can take the UK one too real quick.
Yeah, that's
the UK one, I wouldn't say that is a new major risk. So the question is around the UK High Court is basically stating that a controller to collect consent as it's done today must also adhere to the data subject having a clear depiction of what they're consenting to. So that's really where we go around those regulatory links and being able to also see if the banner is showing all those deceitful patterns and such. The reason why we're picking up on deceitful patterns is because it must be clear and explicit consent to the organization. Again, not giving legal advice, but that's why a lot of CMP banners have it so that when you go and view the more options or details, you'll be able to see exactly what's going on per section and what's firing on the website. And again, the EU, UK, a little bit more strict, golden standard with GDPR, but that has, from my perspective, been part of the play since the origin of being very explicit and clear and transparent to your consumers. But they're doubling down on it more now because it's not necessarily going as they had intended. So in addition to fining, I think that new case will help push people to actually honor consent on the websites and be more explicit about what they're doing around collections.
Right. I think that's a trend that we're seeing. And we're like, again, we're not legal experts. I can't tell you the exact ramifications of this, but yeah, the act of gathering consent is not always clear to the user. So even if, they're saying, oh, we're going to be sharing your data this way and that way, if it's not clear, there's probably going to be stricter regulations around that going forward.
Yeah.
So the next question I see on here, what functionality does Privado have over, for example, Microsoft Purview, Varonis, etc.? So I just did a quick look up on those products. So from what my understanding is those are data governance, data security products. So they look at the data that a company has and identify, classify it, where is it stored, that kind of thing. So what Privado does is entirely different, and so it's not focused on security; it's focused on entirely on privacy. And the way that we do that is we scan the code. There's two ways, right? We talked about it. Scanning the code that is contain the logic of what data we collect, where are we storing it, so we can figure out where the data is going, what it's being used for, where it's being shared. But we're not scanning any data itself. We're just scanning the code that has the logic for what data is going where. And for the dynamic scan, we're scanning live software products, or they could be before they go live, but finished products, and simulating user actions, recording data flows and data activity that occurred during that process. So from my understanding, those two products serve different purposes and for different groups. The next question I see on here: can this be applied to any AI system as well? So I don't know the specifics of what you're going for there, but we can scan the code for any software product and pick up what data is coded in to be picked up, and where it's being shared and so on. And we also see what data is being sent to an AI system, right? One of the things that is more complicated about AI systems is a lot of times we're talking about chatbots or tools that can intake user input that is just open text, right? And so you could input any type of information in there, and then the AI can generate any type of information based on the rules. So the thing that I was saying before, what we don't do is we don't scan the data itself. So we could say, all right, user input being sent here, but we're not looking at the words that they're processing and the output. So there's probably some AI governance tools that would cover some other pieces of that, but we can help with the data collection, storage, sharing risks that go along with any software product. Let's see, do we have any other ones in here?
I think that's it right now.
Anything else to add, Patrick, on those?
No, I think those were great questions, and thanks for answering them, Ben. It really does come down to just being able to plug into that source of truth, your SCMs and your CI/CD pipelines. So if you have AI functionality in there, we'll be able to pick up on it. And across a few of my customers, we've been able to pick up on things like OpenAI or other AI solutions, and our privacy analyst teams were able to then speak with legal on the finding that they have found through the code scan and be able to take remediation, because some of those tools were not sanctioned by the organization, the privacy team or the security team. And a couple devs, engineers wanted to use, a free software, sign up for a trial, and they were ingesting data and adding additional unknown risk that the privacy teams were not aware of. So through using Privado, they were able to mitigate the risk. Even though their teams were able to use AI, they still needed to keep a wraps on what kind of AI they were using. So it's definitely a big challenge right now for a lot of organizations that are starting to tap into the AI field, just because it is so new and generative. So keeping tabs on that, especially for sensitive and highly sensitive information like gender, sexual orientation, those kind of things getting sent over there. Teams really need to have a clear understanding, and it gives my legal teams the ability to stand on a firm foot and be able to say definitively exactly what their devs are building into their functionality, exactly what SDKs functionality are operating within their software, and really gives them some peace of mind, saves them time, and really starts bridging that gap between the engineering and privacy teams, because the devs start learning what not to do. But that's what I've been seeing a theme across the board of more people really trying to dig in to understand, first and foremost, what do we have going on in our ecosystem, and then prioritizing those risks as they see fit.
Thanks, Patrick. Well, thanks everyone for attending this session.